Hi all, Dan Wilson here from Felix, and today I get the great pleasure to interview Glen Ercegovich from Primero about his and their journey with Felix today. Welcome, Glen.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great pleasure.
Good to hear, mate. Before we get started, Glen, can you tell me a little bit about Primero, the organisation, the industry or industries that you operate in, local, global operations, those types of things?
Yeah, so Primero Group, its inception was back in 2011, so we've been around for approximately 10, 11 years. We're an engineering construction company focused on mainly in Western Australia around the rare earths and iron ore and lithium construction projects, where key clients ranging from the Rio Tintos to the junior miners. We also have an office in Montreal. We have approximately about 1,000 employees at the moment.
Fantastic. A fast-growing and forward-thinking company by the sounds. And what about yourself, your job title, and give us a little bit of an insight into a day in the life. You know, what does your week typically look like? Your role, your responsibility, the objectives.
So I'm a procurement manager for the group. So I'm responsible for the procurement of goods and services throughout the whole company. We have a couple of divisions at Primero. We have an operation and maintenance division and also a project division as well. So I have a team of about half a dozen direct procurement officers that work for me, and I work closely with all the project engineers across all the projects currently underway. So day-to-day tasks involved, I focus mainly on vendor management, and that's where Felix has come into play, evaluating vendors, making sure that we're using vendors that are compliant, that tick all the boxes, but and also making sure that our processes and procedures are all up to date, which seems to be an ongoing task for me.
Yeah, I bet, no doubt. You mentioned Felix has come in to assist in that day-to-day role. Can you take me back to pre-Felix? You know, what were you trying to do? How were you coping? You know, the types of challenges you were facing day to day, and probably the easiest way to describe it would be like, you know, what was frustrating you and your organisation about the way that you were handling that vendor management piece?
Well, pre-Felix, we didn't really have a vendor management software. It was all based around spreadsheets and pulling data out of our ERP. So the main reason that we brought in Felix was to make sure that we were compliant with our ISO accreditation. So prior to Felix, like I said, our approved vendor list at AVL was just a spreadsheet that never got updated. I'd issue it out to engineers, and then we'd have missing vendors on there that we actually had accounts with. That it was time consuming to constantly update our AVL, and along with making sure that vendors are compliant with insurance COCs that never got updated, never got filed away. So it was just extremely cumbersome to manage our vendors without the use of a software system like Felix. It would just, I would need an extra couple of staff just to manually update these spreadsheets and evaluations and whatnot.
Yeah, sure. And what particular point, I guess, in the journey of you at Primero did you identify that there was a problem? Was it, you know, very early on and you were looking to implement a solution, or were you happy with the status quo? Was there a particular trigger point that you went and said, look, I need to go or we need to go and, you know, find a solution?
Well, it's probably during our initial audits, internal and external audits, where these observations would come into play, where, you know, we're using manual new supplier forms and how we were evaluating. We were very lucky to fumble through these audits early on at our company at Primero. So those audits were a major trigger point because, you know, we needed to keep our accreditation. So probably half a dozen years ago, I sort of said we need a better system. We can't keep focusing on manual spreadsheets. It come to the realization that we either start looking at expanding our procurement team and investing in more resources, or looking at a vendor management systems such as Felix. We evaluate the decision between adding more resources and implementing a system, and in the end, we decided to go with Felix, which saved us money in the long run. So, and I had the backing of our directors and our executive leadership team, but it just took a bit of a process to get Felix on board from our end and to implement the software.
Great segue. Next question is really around how did you hear about Felix? And you mentioned that you had the support of the directors. I'm really keen to understand, some of the business drivers from a C-suite perspective. What matters to Primero? You mentioned you had their support. Was there anything beyond the audit, that they were really focused on? The whole know your supplier, ESG related initiatives. As I said at the start, Primero seems like a very fast growing and forward thinking company. Were some of those types of things real drivers for the C-suite and the directorship to implement a system like Felix?
Yeah, well, as you said, we're very fast growing. We've grown from, I can remember half a dozen years ago, our turnover was like less than 60 million, and now we're pushing up to $500 million. So during that time of fast growth, we've hired good people, and along with those good people come great ideas. So Felix was first mentioned to me from employees that work at Primero, that worked at other organisations that utilise a vendor management system like Felix. I personally, I've heard of other platforms such as Felix, but due to the recommendations from my colleagues and other friends and people in similar roles at other companies over here in Western Australia, we decided to push on with Felix. And with the support, like I said earlier, with the support of our directors and the executive team, they were all in for implementing a system that was going to help us grow and move with the times.
That's great to hear. Something that we're really proud of at Felix, as well as helping organisations, on that innovation journey and really, supercharge their growth, because you want to ensure that you're able to, be efficient in your operations. And like you said, without Felix, you need a couple more staff. And, if you can systemize those processes, it's really powerful. All right. So we've spoken about your journey to recognize the problem. You'd identified that there's solutions in the market. You'd chosen Felix. Keen to understand how the implementation process went, how long it took. Did anything unexpected come up? Was there anything that we could do to make that better, and your overall satisfaction with the implementation?
All credit to your sales team and implementation team. Liam Gill, who was my contact at Felix, he was fantastic in touching base constantly at where we're at, how can he help. Yeah, he just made the whole process a lot smoother, and it wasn't difficult at all. What was really impressive was once we signed on the dotted line, there was a 12-week schedule put in place detailing all the milestones that needed to be hit. We actually condensed that to 8 weeks and hit that target, which is great. And the after-sales support has been fantastic. So, all credit to your team there at Felix, because that made the whole process very seamless. The only issue was when it came to that sort of integration between Felix and our existing ERP, which our IT department had to migrate and make sure that the two systems talk together, which took some time. But I suppose that's just an internal Primero issue.
Great. All right. So we've gotten through the implementation process. It's up and running. Now that we're in organisation, you guys are utilising the tool. Do you feel like it's solved some of those issues that you set out to address in the first place? And have you got any quantifiable before and after type statistics that you can share with us?
I suppose initially, when prior to Felix, we would upload every vendor that issued an invoice. So we had an approved vendor list of probably over 2,000 to 3,000 vendors in our ERP. So bringing in Felix, that was a good way to cull that list and just utilise the vendors that want to work for Primero and want to tick all the boxes and be compliant. So currently we have 362 approved vendors in our system, but there has been about 600 invitations sent through to the market. In regards to culling our vendor list, it's been great, and also ensuring that data in Felix is correct. So now when we do get new project engineers that are new to the business and they want to know, who can we use for civil works on our projects, they're not just going onto Google and searching Joe blogs that we've never used before, and then going that far down the rabbit hole where a contract gets issued, but no, we can't use them because they're not an approved vendor. So it's really saved a lot of time in that regard.
Thanks, Glenn. Also in that, you started to touch on it, when you're utilising Felix to identify the compliant vendors in your supply chain, who you can and can't use and who's performed well for you in the past. One of the other key aspects, of course, is understanding if they are currently compliant, they've got all their insurances and licenses up to date. So that risk mitigation element to ensure that your field staff are not engaging somebody that may not have, liability insurances in place at the time of engagement, etc. Can you talk to me a little bit about that risk mitigation journey and what does that mean to Primero? How much is that worth to you as a company?
Well, that's the entire reason that we brought Felix in the first place, was having a subcontractor on site where those compliance documentation weren't on file against that particular subby. So to have that sort of one point of truth to know that when you're using an approved vendor that's on our AVL, that's been approved in Felix, all the compliance documentation is up to date and relevant. Prior to that, we were using subcontractors, and 99% of the time they would have insurances, but we just wouldn't have copies of them. So having Felix in place, it just eliminates all risk, and it's definitely a big tick when it comes to our risk mitigation and our commercial team and legal team. We're right behind Felix, and that's one of the reasons that we brought it on.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And again, I feel like you're a couple of steps ahead of me each time, but we're segueing into the next question I was going to ask. You were in charge of the process of purchasing and implementing the Felix system, and it's obviously key to your function. But what impact has using Felix had on other aspects and other teams within Primero? You just touched on it briefly.
Oh, like I said, yeah, our commercial team and legal team, they're right behind Felix just because, like you said, the risk mitigation. And not only them, but our project teams, our project engineers and our project managers, they're probably, apart from myself and my team, these employees are the ones that utilise Felix on a day-to-day basis. And with the constant evaluations of vendors, they can quickly look up a vendor in Felix, see what they've scored on previous evaluations. If they've got a low score, touch base with myself, my team, and maybe project engineers that have used in the past and get some more feedback on those vendors. So that whole managing vendors, using vendors that will support Primero and work with us, that's a massive bonus for the group.
Thanks for that, Glenn. You're utilising two Felix modules at the moment, the vendor management piece and the API. We have additional modules in sourcing and contracts. What about the current modules do you enjoy using, and have you got any plans to integrate additional Felix modules into those in the future?
So we've only started using Felix towards the end of last year, and as I've talked about earlier, purely to manage our vendors and onboard our vendors. We have the RFQ module, which we've yet to utilise, but our operations and maintenance division are going to be utilising that RFQ module for all packages that are going to be awarded moving forward. I have the support of our leadership team to utilise the RFQ module for projects moving forward. It's just a bit difficult at this point in time because it's sort of in between projects. So the new projects that will be coming on board for Primero will be utilising this RFQ module. Once we get some feedback from our engineers on how that works, we could possibly be looking at other modules as well. I know that you touched on the contracts module, which could be an option down the track.
Thanks, Glenn. And you spoke about, you've integrated your Felix instance with your ERP, utilising our standard API. What benefits has that brought to the organisation and in terms of not duplicating data entry efforts and those types of things?
Oh, just previously we had like I said, we had a manual form with the issue out to vendors. They would complete the questionnaire, put their banking details on this form, and then we relied on our accounts department to enter those banking details into our ERP. There was, you can't eliminate human error. So with that transition from a document to our ERP, there was some errors with a 9 being entered instead of a 6, which doesn't seem like much, but caused a massive issue down the track. So now that we have vendors completing the banking information, the ABNs and correct email addresses in Felix, that all gets transitioned across to ERP, which eliminates the risk of human error from our end.
Love to hear that. Glen, you mentioned before that Primero have some operations in Canada and North America. As I understand it, they're utilising Felix as well. Can you give me a little bit of insight into that team and how that came about?
So in Montreal is one of our engineering offices, and they've got some key clients there, and they've done a couple of construction projects. They heard about Felix, that the Perth office was utilising this vendor management software. So they have some big projects that are going to hopefully come into play. So it's good to see that the Montreal office is taking foot forward in getting a vendor management system and procurement system into place prior to these projects kicking off, which is good to hear. So they've got a whole lot of vendors that the company hasn't used in the past. So getting them to be uploading the Felix and ticking all the boxes and making sure that they're compliant is a great move.
Great. What's on the horizon for yourself and for Primero moving forward, and how do you think that, or how do you hope the partnership with Felix can help?
Oh, hopefully it's onwards and upwards for Primero. I know that there's quite a bit of work that we're tendering on, and it's in the pipeline. So, as I said before, I'm looking forward to having all the RFQs issued through Felix, having all of our project teams using the same format and going out to market, which will definitely help with vendors pricing our works. As you may be aware, Primero falls under the NRW group, so I'd like to see the whole of NRW group of companies utilising Felix and having that integration through the 8 companies under the group. So I can only see great things in the future between Primero and Felix. It's definitely been a great move, and I really, really appreciate the after-sales support from your team. The weekly meetings are fantastic. They don't have to be long, but if you've got issues, they're always there to listen and help with us and resolve those bugs if there are any. So I've got nothing but great things to say about Felix. I'm a big advocate of Felix, so it's been great for my day-to-day work life and making the vendor management side of things a lot easier and less time-consuming.
That is very heartwarming to hear, Glen. Finally, mate, you've summarised that really well. But if you had colleagues or contemporaries in other organisations that had just started looking for a vendor management and procurement solution, or if they are considering Felix, what would you say to them?
Initially, before I even engaged Felix, I had friends in the industry that recommended Felix, and I did the same. It's a great software, great people to work with. Like I said before, I heard about Felix from friends in the industry. They had nothing but great things to say about Felix. It's helped their business, their departments. Anyone out there is looking for a vendor management system that will help them save time and money. I was definitely recommending Felix for their company.
Great to hear. Glen, really appreciate your time today. You've been generous. Your journey with Felix to date has been really impressive for us to see, a great forward-thinking company that's innovative and wanting to achieve, the types of things that we've spoken about throughout the webinar. You guys have embraced Felix with open arms, and you're reaping the business benefits from that as a result. So congratulations on your journey to date, and we look forward to continuing the relationship.
Thank you, Dan.